I am Rebecca, 29 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was just an ordinary physical therapist working long hours at a rehabilitation center, barely scraping by in my studio apartment. My great-aunt Margaret raised me when my own parents couldn't be bothered. She was wealthy but lived humbly, always teaching me that true worth comes from helping others, not from what's in your bank account. When she passed away last year from cancer, I was devastated. Then came the lawyer's call that changed everything. She had left me her entire $30 million estate. The family who hadn't visited her once during her illness suddenly wanted everything. I refused. If you want to see how money reveals people's true nature, keep watching. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up, my parents Jennifer and Michael were physically present but emotionally miles away. My father spent 70-hour weeks building his consulting firm, while my mother Jennifer buried herself in charity galas and country club politics. They provided the basics: food, shelter, expensive private schools, but warmth and genuine connection were luxuries they never offered. Family dinners happened maybe twice a month, and even then, my parents spent most of the time checking their phones or discussing business deals. I learned early that their love came with conditions and expectations I could never quite meet. From age 6, I spent every weekend and school holiday with my great-aunt Margaret. Her cozy 3-bedroom cottage became my sanctuary. Despite having accumulated massive wealth through her late husband's successful chain of medical supply stores, she lived with remarkable simplicity. Her 2-acre property featured a herb garden, where she taught me to grow basil and mint. She showed me how to knit scarves and bake bread from scratch. While my parents missed every school performance and soccer game, Aunt Margaret was always in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. My great-aunt and her husband Robert had built their fortune from absolutely nothing. They started Medical Solutions Supply in their basement in 1965, with a single van and a dream to help hospitals get quality equipment at fair prices. By the time I was born, the company had grown into a regional empire with 12 locations across 4 states and annual revenues exceeding $50 million. Yet you would never know their wealth by observing their lifestyle. Aunt Margaret drove the same reliable Honda for 15 years. She shopped with coupons and bought clothes at discount stores. Her guiding principle shaped my entire worldview. Money is simply a resource, Rebecca, not a measure of your character. Use it to lift others up, never to put yourself above them. This philosophy created constant tension with my father Michael. As Margaret's only nephew, he had always assumed he would inherit her wealth and finally live the lavish lifestyle he felt he deserved. He resented her frugal ways, calling her cheap and out of touch with modern success standards. What she viewed as teaching moments about humility, he saw as deliberate humiliation. They paid for his expensive MBA education, but expected him to work entry-level positions first. When he graduated, they offered help with a modest house down payment, not the luxury penthouse he had demanded. The relationship reached its breaking point when my father insisted on a senior partnership role at Medical Solutions Supply despite having zero healthcare industry experience. Margaret and Robert refused, explaining that leadership positions must be earned through dedication and expertise. He stormed out, accepting a corporate consulting position instead, and their relationship never fully recovered. For me, however, they took an entirely different approach. They funded my education completely, allowing me to graduate from physical therapy school without any student debt. But they encouraged me to follow my passion for helping people recover from injuries, even though my starting salary was modest compared to other healthcare careers. Throughout my adult years, I maintained an incredibly close bond with Aunt Margaret, especially after Uncle Robert passed away 5 years ago. We shared weekly coffee dates every Thursday morning. I helped her manage her smartphone and taught her to use video calling to stay connected with old friends. She shared family recipes passed down through generations and told fascinating stories about building the business during challenging economic times. During holidays, I consistently chose to spend time at her cottage rather than my parents' elaborate mansion, which created endless drama with my mother, who interpreted this as a personal insult to her hosting abilities. My life was remarkably simple but fulfilling. I rented a small studio apartment about 15 minutes from Margaret's cottage. The space was tiny but efficiently organized, decorated with secondhand furniture. I had refinished myself and filled with plants that thrived in the southern-facing windows. My salary at Riverside Rehabilitation Center covered my basic expenses with little left over for luxuries. I found genuine happiness in simple pleasures like hiking mountain trails on weekends, reading novels borrowed from the public library, and volunteering at the Animal Rescue Center, where I helped exercise dogs recovering from surgery. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Margaret respected my independent lifestyle choices, though she occasionally surprised me with thoughtful practical gifts like new hiking boots when mine wore out, or a high-quality blender when my old one finally died. She never made me feel inadequate for choosing meaningful work over maximum income. Instead, she celebrated my decision to dedicate my life to helping patients regain their strength and mobility after devastating accidents and surgeries. 3 months ago, my world completely shattered. I was finishing patient notes on a quiet Tuesday evening when my phone rang with news that would haunt me forever. Margaret had suffered a massive heart attack while tending her herb garden. The paramedics found her collapsed among the tomato plants she had been watering, still wearing the gardening gloves I had given her for her birthday. Despite their best efforts, she was pronounced dead at the hospital before I could even get there to say goodbye. The funeral became a theatrical performance I will never forget. My parents immediately took control of all arrangements, arguing with the funeral director about every expense as if they were personally paying the bills. My cousin Bradley flew in from Seattle, spending the entire time networking with other attendees instead of grieving. My Aunt Susan sobbed dramatically whenever cameras appeared but stopped crying the moment attention shifted elsewhere. My Uncle David stood awkwardly in corners, checking his stock portfolio on his phone throughout the service. None of these people had visited Margaret during her final months, yet suddenly they were all devastated family members demanding center stage. I felt completely numb throughout the entire ordeal. The two most important people in my life were now gone forever, and I was surrounded by relatives who treated their deaths like networking opportunities. Margaret's cottage, once filled with laughter and warmth, now stood eerily silent. I could not bring myself to enter after the burial. Instead, I returned to my apartment, requested bereavement leave from the rehabilitation center, and tried to process this devastating new reality where my greatest source of love and support had vanished. 3 weeks after we buried Margaret, I received an unexpected phone call from James Patterson, her longtime attorney. He asked me to come to his office for an important meeting about her estate, along with my immediate family members. I had no idea this conversation would completely transform my understanding of both wealth and family loyalty. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday morning, and I spent the intervening days dreading another confrontation with relatives who had already shown their true priorities during the funeral arrangements. The morning of the estate meeting arrived with typical autumn rain, matching my somber mood perfectly. I arrived at Patterson Legal Associates 20 minutes early, wearing a simple black dress and carrying the umbrella Margaret had insisted I keep in my car for emergencies just like this one. The office occupied a beautifully restored colonial building downtown, featuring warm mahogany paneling and comfortable leather furniture throughout the waiting area. James Patterson greeted me with a compassionate handshake and genuine concern in his eyes. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with distinguished gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. Margaret had mentioned him frequently as not only her trusted legal advisor for over 25 years, but also a close personal friend who had guided her through Robert's death and countless business decisions. His obvious grief over losing Margaret made my own eyes fill with tears again. "I am deeply sorry for your tremendous loss, Rebecca," he said softly. "Margaret was truly one of the most remarkable people I have ever known. I will miss our monthly chess games and her incredible homemade cookies at every meeting." His heartfelt emotion reminded me that Margaret's impact extended far beyond our family circle. She had touched many lives with her kindness and generosity. Before we could continue our conversation, the front door opened abruptly, and my entire family arrived simultaneously in their typical dramatic fashion. My father Michael entered first, immediately checking his expensive Rolex watch with obvious impatience. At 58, he resembled an older, more cynical version of Uncle Robert, but completely lacking Robert's warmth and humility. My mother Jennifer followed close behind, clutching a designer purse that probably cost more than my monthly rent payment. My 26-year-old cousin Bradley strutted through the door wearing sunglasses indoors, apparently believing this constituted appropriate business attire for a solemn legal proceeding. His shirt was wrinkled and only partially tucked into his jeans, showing the same disrespect for formal occasions that had characterized his behavior throughout the funeral. Behind them came Aunt Susan, already talking loudly on her phone about some trivial drama involving her book club members. Uncle David shuffled in last, nodding politely in my direction before quickly looking away, as he had done at every family gathering for the past decade. "Let's get this formality finished quickly," my father announced without bothering to offer condolences or greetings to anyone present. "Some of us have important business meetings to attend this afternoon." James smiled diplomatically, but I could see the disapproval in his expression. "Of course, Michael. Now that everyone has arrived, please follow me to our main conference room, where we can discuss Margaret's final wishes in detail." The tension in the room became immediately palpable, as we arranged ourselves around a large mahogany conference table. My father positioned himself at one end as if claiming natural authority over the proceedings, while I deliberately chose a seat near James's position at the head of the table. The others distributed themselves according to their usual family dynamics, with my mother beside my father, Bradley slouching across from them, and Aunt Susan continuing her phone conversation despite the formal setting. James opened an elegant leather portfolio and removed several official documents. "Before we begin reviewing Margaret's testament, I want to emphasize that she was completely mentally competent when she finalized these arrangements last year. She underwent comprehensive psychological evaluation and was extremely deliberate in all her decisions." My father scoffed dismissively. "Just read the document, James. We understand how inheritance procedures work. Margaret was Robert's widow. I'm her closest male relative, so the distribution should be straightforward according to standard protocols." James ignored my father's presumptuous interruption and began reading the formal legal language. The room fell silent as he worked through the technical provisions, revoking previous wills and establishing executorship details. My family members shifted restlessly, clearly impatient to reach the financial details they were all anticipating. Finally, James reached the section everyone had been waiting for, with barely concealed excitement. "I, Margaret Elizabeth Hawthorne, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate to my beloved great-niece, Rebecca Marie Chen." He paused, allowing the words to sink in before continuing. "This includes all liquid assets totaling approximately $10 million, my complete investment portfolio valued at approximately $15 million, all real estate holdings including my primary residence valued at $3 million, and my ownership stake in Medical Solutions Supply valued at approximately $2 million. The conference room went completely silent. I stopped breathing momentarily, convinced I had misunderstood what James had just announced. The numbers seemed impossible. $30 million left entirely to me. James continued reading with professional composure. "I specifically and intentionally make no financial provisions for my nephew Michael Chen, his wife Jennifer Chen, my great-nephew Bradley Morrison, my niece Susan Morrison, or her husband David Morrison, as I have supported them generously throughout their lives and have documented my reasoning extensively with my attorney." My father jumped up so violently that his chair crashed backward onto the hardwood floor. "Let me see that document immediately," he shouted, lunging across the table to snatch the papers from James's hands. He scanned the pages frantically, his face growing redder with each line he read. My mother joined the outburst with characteristic drama. $30 million to a physical therapist? She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that kind of responsibility. Bradley slammed his fist on the mahogany table, causing everyone's water glasses to rattle. "What about my future? I'm family too. I need investment capital for my tech startup ventures. I remained frozen in shocked silence, unable to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. $30 million. My humble, modest great-aunt had accumulated that enormous fortune, and she had entrusted it all to me, despite having so many other family members with seemingly stronger claims. James calmly retrieved the will from my father's grip and pressed a button on his remote control. The large, wall-mounted screen illuminated, showing Margaret sitting peacefully in her familiar living room, wearing her favorite lavender cardigan. My heart clenched painfully at seeing her alive again, looking exactly as she had during our last coffee date just weeks before her death. "If you are watching this recording, it means I have passed away," Margaret began, her voice carrying the same gentle strength I remembered so well. "I want to explain my decisions directly to prevent any confusion or hard feelings among family members." She looked directly into the camera with the determination I had witnessed countless times when she discussed important business matters. "Michael, Susan, and Bradley, I love you all as my family, but I have been deeply disappointed by the values you have demonstrated throughout your adult lives. You have consistently treated wealth as an entitlement rather than a responsibility, and you have shown little genuine interest in maintaining family relationships unless you needed financial assistance." Margaret's recorded message continued for nearly 20 minutes, detailing years of missed family gatherings, unreturned phone calls, and dismissive attitudes toward her simple lifestyle choices. She explained how she had watched my father and cousins prioritize material success over meaningful connections, viewing her and Robert as resources to be exploited, rather than relatives to be cherished. "The business Robert and I built was never about accumulating wealth for its own sake," Margaret explained, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of decades spent building something meaningful. "We created medical solutions supply to serve our community and provide stable employment for hardworking people. We succeeded through integrity, persistence, and treating everyone with dignity and respect." She turned her attention directly to me through the camera. "Rebecca is the only family member who has consistently demonstrated these values throughout her life. She chose a career dedicated to helping people heal and recover, despite the modest financial compensation. She visits me regularly not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares about my well-being and enjoys our time together." Margaret's voice grew stronger as she outlined her hopes for how the inheritance would be used. "I trust Rebecca completely to honor our family legacy and use these resources wisely. She will not squander this opportunity on status symbols or risky schemes designed to impress others. She understands that true wealth comes from making a positive difference in other people's lives." As the video ended, my father exploded with even greater fury than before. "This is complete nonsense. Margaret was obviously suffering from dementia or some other cognitive impairment. No rational person would make such an irrational decision. We will contest this will immediately and have it overturned by any court in the state." James remained perfectly calm despite the chaos erupting around him. "I anticipated that reaction, Michael, which is why Margaret underwent extensive neurological and psychological testing before finalizing these arrangements. She was evaluated by 3 independent medical professionals who certified her complete mental competence. Additionally, she spent months documenting the behavioral patterns that influenced her decision." He opened another folder and began distributing copies of medical reports, psychological evaluations, and detailed written records Margaret had maintained. These documents chronicle years of interactions with each family member, including recorded phone conversations where explicit threats were made about cutting off access to Rebecca if certain financial demands were not met. My mother's demeanor shifted abruptly from outrage to artificial sweetness as she realized their aggressive approach was failing. "Rebecca, darling, you must understand that your great-aunt was confused about family dynamics. This money rightfully belongs to all of us, not just you. Surely you will do the right thing and share it equally among all the relatives who loved her so much." The obvious manipulation in her voice made my stomach turn. These people had barely acknowledged Margaret's existence while she was alive, yet now they were claiming to be grieving relatives who deserved equal treatment. I found my voice for the first time since the reading began. "I need time to process all of this information. I had no idea she would do something like this." "Process what exactly?" Bradley scoffed with obvious contempt. "There's nothing to think about here. That money should be managed by someone with actual business experience and investment knowledge, not wasted by someone who works with injured people for minimum wage." My father stepped closer, his tone becoming more threatening. You have a choice to make right now, Rebecca. Either you agree to distribute this inheritance properly among the legitimate family members, or you can consider yourself permanently excluded from this family. The ultimatum hung heavily in the air between us like a dark cloud. I looked around at each family member's face, searching desperately for any sign of genuine love or understanding. Instead, I found only greed, manipulation, and barely concealed hostility. In that pivotal moment, I realized a painful but liberating truth. They had never truly seen me as family anyway. I was simply a potential obstacle standing between them and what they believed they deserved. I am not agreeing to anything right now, I stated firmly, standing up from my chair with newfound determination. I need time to understand what Margaret actually wanted and why she made this decision. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Then you can pack your belongings and find somewhere else to live tonight. The apartment you rent is owned by one of our subsidiary companies. Consider your lease immediately terminated. My stomach dropped as I realized he was telling the truth. When I had struggled to qualify for the apartment on my therapist's salary 3 years ago, they had offered to help with the application process. I never realized they actually owned the entire building through one of their numerous business investments. You have exactly 1 hour to collect your essential belongings, my mother announced, checking her diamond-encrusted watch with theatrical precision. The locks will be changed this afternoon, and security will be notified that you are no longer authorized to enter the premises. Bradley smirked with obvious satisfaction. Hope those $30 million will keep you warm tonight, sis. Better learn how to manage money quickly, because you're about to find out how expensive homelessness can be. 1 hour is not nearly enough time to pack up an entire life, but I moved through my apartment like a robot, grabbing clothes, important documents, toiletries, and a few irreplaceable sentimental items. My mind kept spinning with disbelief that my own family could treat me so cruelly over money they had never earned or deserved. My father stood in the doorway like a prison guard, watching my every movement to ensure I did not take anything he considered valuable. My mother remained downstairs, already on the phone with real estate agents about selling Margaret's cottage as quickly as possible. Her voice carried upstairs as she discussed renovation plans and market pricing. You were never really part of this family anyway, my father said coldly as I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag. Your mother and I only took you in because Margaret insisted and threatened to cut off financial support if we refused. You have been nothing but an expensive obligation for 29 years. The casual cruelty of his revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had always sensed that I was unwanted, but having it confirmed so bluntly was devastating in ways I had not anticipated. We invested considerable money in your education, healthcare, and other expenses over the years, my mother added, appearing in the doorway with perfect timing for maximum emotional impact. Consider this inheritance as repayment for all those years of financial support we provided. Reluctantly, Bradley lounged against the wall, recording everything on his phone with obvious amusement. This is going viral, he announced gleefully. Rich girl gets kicked out by her own family. The internet is going to love this drama. I zipped up my final bag, fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. I was determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down completely. With 3 bags slung over my shoulders and 1 more in my hand, I made my way downstairs past family members who had already begun discussing how to divide my inheritance among themselves. At the front door, I turned around one final time to look at the people who had raised me. You might have money now, my mother said with false confidence, but family connections last forever. You will realize eventually what you have thrown away by choosing greed over loyalty. I took a deep breath and responded with more strength than I knew I possessed. I am not the one choosing money over family relationships. You are. With those words, I walked out into the cool evening air and heard the door slam shut behind me with terrifying finality. Standing beside my aging sedan in the driveway, I felt the full weight of my new reality crashing down like an avalanche. I was effectively homeless, estranged from my entire family, and suddenly responsible for managing wealth beyond my comprehension. I sat in my car and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. They streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel, releasing great heaving sobs that made my entire body shake violently. I cried for Margaret, whose absence felt more acute than ever, I cried for the family I had always hoped to have but apparently never possessed. Mostly, I cried for myself, adrift in a world that had completely transformed in the span of a few devastating hours. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, I wiped my eyes and remembered the envelope James had given me at the law office. Inside, I found keys with a familiar butterfly-shaped keychain that Margaret had treasured, along with the address of a property I did not recognize. There was also a handwritten note in Margaret's distinctive script. "Rebecca, if you are reading this, then you probably need a place to stay. This cottage has been waiting for you." The address led me to a charming lakeside cottage about 30 minutes outside town, nestled among towering pine trees with a view of the water that took my breath away. Margaret had somehow purchased this sanctuary without anyone in the family knowing, creating a perfect refuge for exactly this situation. As I unlocked the front door with trembling hands, I was greeted by the familiar scent of lavender and lemon oil that had always made her home feel like a safe haven. The cottage was small but beautifully appointed, with comfortable furniture and large windows that filled every room with natural light. On the kitchen table, I found another envelope with my name written in Margaret's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter that would change my perspective on everything that had just happened to me. "My dearest Rebecca," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then my fears about our family's true nature have unfortunately been confirmed. I am so sorry you had to experience their cruelty firsthand, but I want you to know that you are not alone in this fight. Over the past 5 years, I have been quietly building a network of people who share our values and will support you in honoring the legacy Robert and I worked so hard to create." Margaret's letter continued for several pages, revealing a level of strategic planning that amazed me. She had anticipated every possible scenario, from my family's attempts to contest the will to their efforts to make me homeless. More importantly, she had prepared responses to each potential challenge, surrounding me with allies I never knew existed. The next morning brought an unexpected knock at the cottage door. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile, holding a basket of fresh muffins and coffee. "You must be Rebecca," she said gently. "I'm Patricia Williams, Margaret's business partner for the past decade. She asked me to check on you if anything ever happened to her." Patricia entered the cottage and immediately made herself at home, brewing coffee and arranging the muffins on Margaret's favorite serving plate. "Your great-aunt was one of the most remarkable people I have ever known," she said as we settled into the comfortable living room chairs. "She talked about you constantly, always with such pride and affection. She knew this day might come, and she wanted to make sure you had everything you needed to succeed." Over the next hour, Patricia revealed the true scope of Margaret's preparations. There were detailed financial plans, investment strategies, and most importantly, a comprehensive network of advisors, employees, and friends who had agreed to help guide me through the complex world of wealth management. Margaret had even arranged for a team of security professionals to monitor the cottage and ensure my safety if my family became more aggressive in their demands. "The inheritance is just the beginning," Patricia explained, opening a leather portfolio filled with documents. "Margaret established several trust funds and charitable foundations that she wanted you to oversee. She believed you would understand how to use wealth as a force for positive change rather than personal indulgence." As Patricia outlined the various philanthropic initiatives Margaret had started, I began to understand the true magnitude of what had been entrusted to me. There was a scholarship fund for students from low-income families pursuing healthcare careers, a grant program supporting small medical practices in underserved communities, and a foundation dedicated to improving rehabilitation services for accident victims. The doorbell rang again, and Patricia smiled knowingly. "That would be Dr. Martinez," she said, "Margaret's personal physician and closest friend for over 20 years. Dr. Elena Martinez entered with the same warmth Patricia had shown, carrying a medical bag and an obvious concern for my well-being. "Margaret was like a mother to me," Dr. Martinez explained as she checked my blood pressure and pulse, insisting on ensuring I was handling the stress appropriately. "When I graduated medical school with enormous debt, she quietly paid off my student loans and helped me establish my practice. She never asked for anything in return except that I promised to treat patients with dignity, regardless of their ability to pay." Throughout the day, more people arrived at the cottage, each with their own story of how Margaret had touched their lives. There was Carlos, the maintenance supervisor at Medical Solutions Supply, who brought security footage showing my family members stealing valuable items from Margaret's main house after the funeral. Maria, Margaret's former housekeeper, arrived with photo albums and journals documenting years of family interactions that would be crucial if legal challenges arose. James Patterson appeared in the afternoon with a team of additional attorneys, all prepared to defend Margaret's wishes against any potential legal assault. "Your family hired 3 different law firms yesterday," he informed me with professional confidence. "They are planning a coordinated attack on the will's validity, but we have been preparing for this possibility for months." As evening approached, I found myself sitting on the cottage's back deck, watching the sunset reflect across the peaceful lake. The past 24 hours had been an emotional hurricane, but surrounded by Margaret's chosen family of loyal friends and colleagues, I finally felt a sense of stability returning to my world. Patricia joined me on the deck, carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. "Margaret used to sit in this exact spot every evening," she said softly. "She called it her thinking time, when she would plan how to make the biggest positive impact with the resources she had been blessed to accumulate." "I still cannot believe she trusted me with all of this," I admitted, gesturing toward the cottage and everything it represented. "I am just a physical therapist who barely managed to pay rent each month. How can I possibly manage $30 million responsibly?" Patricia smiled with the same patient wisdom I remembered from Margaret. "That is exactly why she chose you, Rebecca. You understand that money is a tool for helping others, not a trophy to display. You have dedicated your career to healing people, even when it meant financial sacrifice. Those are the qualities she valued most." Over the following weeks, I immersed myself in understanding the full scope of Margaret's business empire and philanthropic vision. With Patricia's guidance, I learned about investment strategies, tax implications, and the complex regulations governing charitable foundations. It was overwhelming at first, but I discovered that many of the skills I had developed as a physical therapist translated surprisingly well to managing wealth responsibly. My family made several attempts to intimidate me into changing my position. They hired private investigators to follow me, spread rumors about my mental stability, and even attempted to break into the cottage to search for additional assets. Each time, Margaret's security team and legal professionals were ready with appropriate responses, protecting both my safety and my legal rights. The most difficult moment came when my father called 6 weeks after the confrontation, his voice unusually subdued. "Rebecca, we need to talk," he said. "I think we all overreacted in the heat of the moment. Family should stick together during difficult times like these." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps they had genuinely reflected on their behavior and wanted to rebuild our relationships. But his next words quickly shattered that illusion. "I have been researching the best investment opportunities for your inheritance," he continued. "With my business experience, I could help you turn that $30 million into $50 million within 2 years." I realized then that nothing had fundamentally changed. They still viewed me as a naive obstacle standing between them and what they believed they deserved. The only difference was their tactical approach, switching from aggressive demands to manipulative offers of assistance. "Thank you for the offer," I replied calmly, "but I am working with Margaret's established team of advisors. They understand her vision and values in ways that align with my own goals." The conversation ended with my father's familiar threats about family loyalty and future regrets, confirming that I had made the right decision to maintain my boundaries. 3 months after inheriting Margaret's estate, I hosted the first annual scholarship ceremony for the Margaret and Robert Hawthorne Foundation. 25 students received full funding for their healthcare education, including Maria Santos, a young woman whose family had fled domestic violence and was living in a homeless shelter while she worked multiple jobs to support her younger siblings. As I watched Maria accept her scholarship with tears of gratitude streaming down her face, I felt Margaret's presence more strongly than ever. This was exactly what she had envisioned, using wealth to create opportunities for people who had the determination and character to make a difference in the world, but lacked the financial resources to pursue their dreams. "My grandmother works 3 jobs cleaning offices," Maria said through her tears as she addressed the audience. "She always told me that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from me. This scholarship means that someday I can become a nurse and help families like mine have access to quality health care." In that moment, I understood completely why Margaret had chosen me as her heir. It was never really about the money itself, but about finding someone who would carry forward her values and vision for making the world a more compassionate place. The inheritance was not a burden or an entitlement, but a sacred trust to amplify the positive impact that she and Robert had spent their lives building. I returned to work at the rehabilitation center, much to the surprise of colleagues who assumed I would retire immediately upon becoming wealthy. Instead, I used my resources to enhance our programs dramatically. We purchased state-of-the-art equipment, hired additional therapists, and created a fund to provide free services for patients whose insurance coverage was inadequate. My work took on new meaning, as I realized that I could now remove financial barriers that prevented people from accessing the care they needed to rebuild their lives after devastating injuries. Every patient I helped represented not just professional achievement, but a living testament to Margaret's belief that wealth should be used to heal, rather than to accumulate status symbols. The lakeside cottage became my permanent home, and I gradually transformed it into a gathering place for the extended family Margaret had created through decades of kindness and generosity. Sunday dinners continued, now hosted by me, with rotating guests including Patricia, Dr. Martinez, Carlos, Maria, and others who had been touched by Margaret's compassion. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenging times, and collaborated on expanding the foundation's reach to help even more deserving students and medical programs. It was not the family I had been born into, but it was a community bound by something far stronger than blood relations, shared values, and genuine care for each other's well-being. 6 months after that life-changing meeting in James Patterson's office, I visited Margaret's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the small stone bench nearby, finally ready to have the conversation I had been avoiding. "I think I understand now why you made the choice you did," I told her, feeling only slightly self-conscious about speaking aloud to her memory. "It was never about punishing them or rewarding me. It was about ensuring that the values you and Robert lived by would continue to make a difference in the world." A gentle breeze rustled through the oak trees above, sending golden leaves spiraling down around the peaceful cemetery. It was the kind of beautiful autumn day Margaret had always loved, perfect for working in the garden and planning new ways to help others. "The foundation is growing beyond anything we imagined," I continued. "We have already funded 50 scholarships, supported 12 medical clinics in rural areas, and helped hundreds of accident victims access rehabilitation services they could never have afforded otherwise. Every person we help carries forward the ripple effect of your generosity." As I sat there surrounded by the quiet beauty of the cemetery, I reflected on how profoundly my life had changed in just 6 months. The inheritance had indeed revealed true colors, showing me which relationships were based on genuine love versus financial opportunity. But more importantly, it had shown me my own strength and capacity to honor a legacy much larger than myself. My family never stopped their legal challenges, but each attempt failed, as Margaret's meticulous planning and documentation proved unshakable. Eventually, they faded from my life entirely, occasionally surfacing in social media posts showcasing their continued pursuit of wealth and status through other means. I felt no bitterness toward them, only sadness for the relationships we might have had if they had been capable of valuing people over profit. They had made their choice just as clearly as I had made mine, and I was finally at peace with the consequences of standing firm in my convictions. The cottage by the lake became a symbol of everything Margaret had taught me about finding contentment in simple pleasures, while using resources to create lasting positive change. Every sunrise over the water reminded me that true wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we contribute to making the world more compassionate and just. Margaret's legacy lived on through every scholarship recipient who went on to heal others, every patient who regained mobility through our enhanced rehabilitation programs, and every family who received medical care they thought they could never afford. That was the inheritance that truly mattered. Not the money itself, but the love and hope it allowed us to share with people who needed it most. If you are facing pressure from family or friends to compromise your values for financial gain, remember that your integrity is worth more than any amount of money. The people who truly love you will support your decisions to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Those who only value you for what you can provide were never really your family to begin with. Stand firm in your convictions, trust in your ability to honor the values that matter most to you, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is far more valuable than the family we are born into. True wealth is measured not by what we have, but by the positive difference we make in the lives of others. 1 year after that transformative day in the attorney's office, I stood before an audience of 300 people at the annual Medical Heroes Gala, preparing to announce the most ambitious expansion of Margaret's legacy yet. The ballroom was filled with doctors, nurses, therapists, and community leaders who had all witnessed the remarkable growth of our foundation's impact throughout the past 12 months. Tonight, I am thrilled to announce the launch of the Margaret Hawthorne Institute for Healing Innovation, I said, my voice carrying across the elegant venue. This $50 million initiative will establish 5 regional centers dedicated to providing free rehabilitation services, medical equipment, and vocational retraining for accident survivors and their families. The enthusiastic applause that followed reminded me of Margaret's words about how wealth could be a force for transformation when guided by compassion rather than ego. Each clap represented another life that would be touched by her vision, another family that would find hope during their darkest moments. In the front row sat Carlos Martinez, no longer just a maintenance supervisor but now the director of our community outreach programs. Beside him was Dr. Elena Martinez, who had accepted the position of Chief Medical Advisor for all our healthcare initiatives. Patricia Williams beamed with pride from her seat at the head table, having recently been promoted to Executive Director of the entire foundation. Among the scholarship recipients in attendance was Maria Santos, now in her 2nd year of nursing school and already volunteering at local clinics during her breaks. She had started a support group for other students from challenging backgrounds, creating a network of mutual encouragement that embodied everything Margaret had believed about lifting others up rather than climbing over them. When my great-aunt Margaret left me this inheritance, I continued, she also left me a choice about what kind of person I wanted to become. I could have used this wealth to buy luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive vacations. Instead, I chose to honor her belief that our greatest achievements come from the lives we improve, not the possessions we accumulate. The past year had brought countless opportunities to witness this principle in action. Tommy Rodriguez, a construction worker who had lost his legs in a scaffolding accident, received a fully equipped wheelchair and 6 months of intensive physical therapy through our programs. He was now back at work as a safety inspector, using his experience to prevent other families from enduring similar tragedies. Sarah Kim, a single mother who suffered severe injuries in a car accident, had been unable to afford the specialized equipment needed for her recovery. Our foundation not only provided the equipment, but also paid for childcare during her rehabilitation sessions and job retraining when she could no longer perform her previous work as a chef. These stories multiplied week after week, creating a ripple effect of healing and hope that extended far beyond individual recipients. Sarah now volunteers with newly injured patients, sharing her experience and helping them navigate the overwhelming process of recovery. Tommy speaks at construction sites about safety protocols, preventing countless future accidents through his advocacy. The Institute's success attracted attention from major medical organizations across the country. Harvard Medical School invited me to speak about innovative funding models for community healthcare. The American Physical Therapy Association asked me to join their national board of directors. Television interviews and magazine articles brought increasing visibility to our work, but I remained focused on the core mission Margaret had entrusted to me. My biological family made sporadic attempts to reconcile, though their motivations remained transparently self-serving. My cousin Bradley called after reading about the Institute in Forbes magazine, suddenly interested in contributing his business expertise to our operations. My father sent a formal letter proposing a merger between our foundation and his consulting firm, claiming it would create, quote, synergistic opportunities for expanded impact. Each overture followed the same pattern, expressions of admiration for my accomplishments, followed by suggestions about how they could help me achieve even greater success, always concluding with specific requests for financial involvement or leadership positions. Their inability to simply express pride in my work without seeking personal benefit confirmed that my decision to maintain boundaries had been correct. The most challenging moment came when my mother appeared unexpectedly at the rehabilitation center, where I continued working 3 days per week. She had scheduled a fake appointment using an assumed name, then requested to speak with me privately about her treatment plan. "I am so proud of what you have accomplished," she said, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Your father and I have realized how wrong we were to react so harshly when you inherited Margaret's estate. We want to be part of your life again, part of this amazing work you are doing." For a moment, I felt the familiar longing for family acceptance that had shaped so much of my childhood. But then she continued speaking, revealing the true purpose of her visit. "I have been volunteering with several charity organizations in our area," she said. "I could bring significant social connections and fundraising expertise to your foundation. We could host galas at the country club, attract donations from wealthy families who trust our reputation." Her offer sounded reasonable on the surface, but I recognized the underlying assumption that my work needed her social credentials to achieve legitimacy. She could not simply support what I was building. She needed to reshape it according to her vision of how charity should operate. Exclusive events for wealthy donors rather than grassroots community programs. "I appreciate your offer," I replied carefully. "But our foundation operates according to principles that Margaret established. We focus on direct service delivery rather than high-profile fundraising events." Her expression shifted from hopeful to frustrated, as she realized I was not going to grant her the prominent role she expected. The conversation ended with familiar threats about missing out on valuable opportunities and the importance of family connections. As she left, I felt a profound sense of clarity about the difference between people who want to help your mission and people who want to use your mission to help themselves. This distinction became increasingly important as the Foundation's profile grew and attracted attention from various individuals and organizations seeking association with our success. Wealthy philanthropists offered large donations in exchange for naming rights and board positions. Politicians proposed partnerships that would have provided government funding but required compromising our independence. Each opportunity required careful evaluation to determine whether potential partners shared our values or simply wanted to benefit from our reputation. Margaret's detailed journals provided invaluable guidance during these decisions, reminding me that she had faced similar choices throughout her business career and had always prioritized integrity over expansion. The second annual scholarship ceremony exceeded all expectations, with 40 students receiving full funding for their healthcare education. The recipients represented an extraordinary diversity of backgrounds and life experiences. Refugees who had fled violence in their home countries, military veterans transitioning to civilian careers, former inmates seeking redemption through service, and young people from impoverished communities where higher education seemed impossible. During the ceremony, I met Jennifer Walsh, a former drug addict who had been clean for 3 years and dreamed of becoming a counselor to help others overcome addiction. Her scholarship would allow her to complete her psychology degree while supporting her 2 young children as a single mother. 5 years ago, I was living on the streets and had lost custody of my kids. Jennifer told me with remarkable honesty, "I never imagined I could have a future worth living, much less one where I could help other people find hope. This scholarship is not just changing my life. It is changing my children's lives and the lives of everyone I will be able to help as a counselor." Stories like Jennifer's reminded me daily why Margaret had structured her estate the way she did. She understood that transformation happens one person at a time, and that the most powerful changes occur when people who have experienced struggle are equipped to help others facing similar challenges. The Institute's impact extended beyond individual success stories to create systemic changes in how communities approach rehabilitation and recovery. Our model of comprehensive support, combining medical treatment, equipment provision, vocational training, and ongoing mentorship, was being studied and replicated by healthcare systems across the region. 3 years after receiving my inheritance, I was invited to testify before a congressional committee about innovative approaches to healthcare accessibility. The opportunity allowed me to share Margaret's vision with national policymakers and advocate for legislation that would expand funding for community-based rehabilitation programs. True healthcare reform requires more than insurance coverage, I told the committee members. It requires recognizing that healing involves not just medical treatment, but also restoring people's ability to participate fully in their communities and support their families with dignity. The hearing attracted significant media attention. bringing national recognition to our work and generating inquiries from organizations interested in establishing similar programs in their areas. Within 6 months, we had requests from 23 states for assistance in developing their own versions of the Margaret Hawthorne Institute model. Managing this expansion required building a larger team while maintaining the personal approach that had always characterized our work. We hired regional coordinators who shared our values and understood that success should be measured not by the size of our operations, but by the depth of our impact on individual lives. The cottage by the lake remained my sanctuary, a place where I could retreat from the increasing demands of public attention and reconnect with the simple pleasures that Margaret had taught me to value. Evening walks along the water's edge provided time for reflection and planning, while weekend gatherings with my chosen family reminded me of the relationships that made all the work meaningful. Patricia had become not just a business partner, but a surrogate mother, offering wisdom and support during challenging decisions. Dr. Martinez served as both medical advisor and personal friend, ensuring that my own health and well-being remained priorities amid the demanding schedule of foundation management. Carlos had blossomed in his new role, developing innovative outreach programs that connected with communities our traditional approaches might have missed. His background as a working-class immigrant brought perspectives that enriched every aspect of our planning and implementation. The most rewarding development was watching scholarship recipients begin to give back even before completing their education. Maria Santos had started a mentorship program pairing current students with high school students from similar backgrounds. Tommy Rodriguez created a scholarship fund specifically for injured workers seeking vocational retraining. These grassroots initiatives emerged organically from the community we had fostered, proving that Margaret's vision of wealth as a catalyst for widespread positive change was not just idealistic, but practically achievable. Each person who was helped became equipped to help others, creating an ever-expanding network of healing and hope. As I reflected on the journey from that shocking day in the attorney's office to the thriving foundation we had built, I realized that the inheritance had given me far more than financial resources. It had provided the opportunity to discover my own capacity for leadership, my ability to make complex decisions under pressure, and my strength to maintain principles, even when doing so meant personal sacrifice. The cottage walls were now lined with thank you letters from scholarship recipients, photos from rehabilitation center graduations, and newspaper articles documenting the Institute's expanding impact. But the most treasured items remained Margaret's personal possessions: her gardening tools, her favorite recipes, her collection of books about business ethics and social responsibility. These reminders connected me daily to the woman whose wisdom continued to guide every major decision. She had known that inheriting wealth would test my character in ways poverty never could, and she had prepared me for that test through years of patient teaching about values that matter more than money. The Foundation's work had attracted attention from international organizations interested in replicating our model in developing countries. We received invitations to present at conferences in Europe, Asia, and South America, sharing strategies for community-based healthcare that emphasized dignity and empowerment rather than charity dependence. During one such trip to Costa Rica, I met Elena Vargas, a physical therapist working in rural clinics with minimal resources but extraordinary dedication. Our foundation provided funding for equipment and training that allowed her to establish the first rehabilitation center in her region, serving hundreds of families who had previously traveled hundreds of miles for basic physical therapy. "You have given us more than equipment," Elena told me during the center's opening ceremony. "You have given us hope that change is possible and that people in small communities matter just as much as people in big cities." Her words reminded me of Margaret's belief that everyone deserves access to healing and the chance to rebuild their lives after setbacks. 5 years after that life-changing inheritance, I stood once again in the cemetery where Margaret and Robert were buried, this time bringing updates about achievements that exceeded even their ambitious dreams. The foundation had grown to serve 15 states, had provided scholarships to over 300 students, and had helped more than 2,000 families access rehabilitation services they could never have afforded independently. The ripple effects keep expanding. I told them, placing fresh flowers on their shared headstone. Maria graduated nursing school and now manages our pediatric rehabilitation program. Tommy started his own safety consulting business and donates a percentage of profits to help other injured workers. Jennifer counsels addiction recovery patients and credits her transformation to the second chance you made possible. The gentle afternoon sunlight filtered through the oak trees above, creating patterns of light and shadow that reminded me of the complexity of the journey I had traveled. There had been moments of doubt, challenges that seemed overwhelming, and decisions that required courage I was not sure I possessed. But there had also been moments of profound joy watching students receive diplomas they thought were impossible, seeing accident victims take their first steps with new equipment, witnessing communities transform as hope replaced desperation. These experiences had taught me that Margaret's greatest gift was not the money itself, but the opportunity to discover that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when guided by love rather than greed. My biological family had finally stopped their attempts at reconciliation, apparently concluding that I was permanently beyond their influence. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual acquaintances about their continued pursuit of wealth and status through various business ventures, but their lives no longer intersected with mine in any meaningful way. The absence of that relationship had initially felt like loss, but it had been replaced by something far more valuable, a chosen family bound together by shared commitment to making the world more compassionate. Sunday dinners at the cottage had evolved into strategic planning sessions, where we dreamed about future expansions and celebrated recent victories. As I prepared for the Foundation's 5th anniversary celebration, I realized that Margaret's inheritance had accomplished exactly what she intended. It had revealed true character, separated authentic relationships from transactional ones, and provided resources for creating lasting positive change in thousands of lives. The celebration brought together scholarship recipients, rehabilitation patients, community partners, and staff members from all our locations. The diversity of faces and stories represented the beautiful complexity of humanity, people from every background imaginable, united by experiences of struggle, healing, and hope. During my closing remarks, I shared the lesson that had taken me 5 years to fully understand. My great-aunt Margaret did not leave me an inheritance, I said. She left me a calling. The money was simply the tool that allowed me to answer that calling and discover capabilities I never knew I possessed. The evening concluded with announcements about our next expansion, a partnership with medical schools to provide free training for students committed to serving underserved communities, and the establishment of mobile rehabilitation units that would bring services directly to rural areas where transportation barriers prevented access to care. As guests departed and staff members cleaned up, I sat quietly in the corner of the ballroom, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The scared, confused young woman, who had been kicked out of her apartment 5 years earlier, had evolved into someone capable of leading an organization that touched thousands of lives annually. The transformation had not been easy or comfortable, requiring me to develop skills I never imagined needing and make decisions with consequences far beyond my personal life. But it had also been the most meaningful and rewarding experience of my existence, proving that Margaret's faith in my potential had been justified. Looking back, I could see that every challenge had prepared me for greater responsibilities, every setback had taught valuable lessons about resilience, and every success had reinforced the importance of remaining humble and focused on service rather than recognition. The drive back to the cottage took me past the apartment building where I had once lived paycheck to paycheck, worried about rent, and wondering if I would ever feel financially secure. That woman's problems seemed almost quaint compared to the complexities of managing a multi-million-dollar foundation, but I missed neither the stress of financial insecurity nor the simplicity of having limited options. Instead, I had found something better: the profound satisfaction of using resources purposefully, the joy of watching other people achieve dreams they thought were impossible, and the peace that comes from knowing that your life has meaning beyond personal comfort or achievement. The cottage welcomed me home, with its familiar warmth and the sound of lake water lapping gently against the shore. Margaret's presence remained strong in every room, not as a source of pressure to live up to impossible standards, but as a reminder that one person's choices can create waves of positive change that extend far beyond their lifetime. As I prepared for sleep, I reflected on the upcoming week's schedule. visits to 2 new rehabilitation centers, meetings with potential scholarship recipients, and planning sessions for our international expansion pilot program. Each activity represented another opportunity to honor Margaret's legacy, while creating new possibilities for healing and hope. The inheritance had indeed revealed true colors, showing me that some relationships were based on genuine love, while others were rooted in expectation and entitlement. But more importantly, it had revealed my own capacity for growth, leadership, and impact that I never could have imagined when I was simply a physical therapist struggling to pay rent. Margaret's greatest gift was not the $30 million she left me, but the confidence she showed in my ability to use those resources wisely. That trust had transformed not just my life but the lives of thousands of people who had been touched by the programs her vision made possible. The story that began with shocking news in an attorney's office had evolved into a testament to the power of choosing principle over profit, compassion over comfort, and service over status. Every person who received a scholarship, every patient who regained mobility, every family who found hope during their darkest moment, represented proof that Margaret's values could indeed change the world one life at a time. As I drifted off to sleep in the peaceful cottage by the lake, I knew that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to extend that legacy even further, reaching people who had not yet imagined that help was possible, and creating ripples of healing that would continue long after my own life had ended. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.